Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska weather with us on this October the 30th, 2019. As always, we encourage you, your community, your village to stay up to date with local weather conditions in your part of Alaska. And as always, you can check that anytime by calling us at the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391, a free service to you. Now, if it's the first time that you've used this service, write down the number as you get to the message prompts, and you can get through it a lot faster the next time. Of course, you can use weather.gov/Alaska to access marine and aviation weather. And if you click on the TV button at the bottom of the page, you'll get the weather information and the pictures that we'll share with you here tonight on the Alaska Weather Show. If you haven't tried it recently, mobile.weather.gov is your mobile website to get to National Weather Service forecast information. Once you set that up by typing in your location, let's say McCarthy, you can simply save that to your home screen, and using low bandwidth service or limited Wi-Fi, you can get to your weather information a whole lot faster that way on a mobile device. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is an easy way to find me. If you have questions about any of our services or anything you see on this show, questions, comments, and concerns are gladly accepted, as well as pictures from your village this time of year. Love to see what it looks like where you are in your part of Alaska. Please feel free to share those anytime you want. Here's a look at Valdez. In fact, as we look out toward the southeast here, using one of the weather cameras from the FAA, 39 degrees out there around Valdez this afternoon. You can see that roadways look a little wet there, but the snow certainly is a little bit on the damp side across some of the hills there. Looks like the snow line has been going up over the last couple days there as things remain fairly mild around Prince William Sound. A look to the north, though, tells us that winter weather advisories are still in effect for the northern Arctic coast as well as the western Arctic coast there, and high surf advisories and winter weather advisories will continue through tonight and into early tomorrow morning. The high surf should start to improve as we get into the next 24 hours or so. It does look like conditions will gradually improve as the wind abates a little bit more as we get into tonight and early tomorrow. But for now, surf upwards of 4 to 6 feet above normal high tide may be possible in those areas. Also looking at a winter weather advisory here around the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. Maybe another inch of snow on top of what you've already had, but it looks like by late this evening those conditions should start to improve as well. So slippery travel out there if you're moving on any of the area roadways or the main highway systems there. If you're heading north and south through Broad Pass, for example, we know the conditions have been a little bit wet and probably a little slippery in a few places. As we look at the satellite picture over the course of the last 12 hours or so, you can see a wave of low pressure out across the west, but high pressure's carved out a nice area across the north and southern Bering Sea. A lot of low clouds trapped underneath that, but the main weather maker right now is working across the Chukchi coast, and a strong northwesterly flow coming in behind that. Looks like a lot of wind coming in from the south, leading through the central and eastern interior. That certainly churning up the waves there across the western Arctic coast. And so what we're watching is that northwesterly flow that's just kind of grazing parts of the northern Kotzebue Sound region right now, but our main concern is really from areas east from Wainwright out toward Point Barrow at this point, and it looks like that will continue to be a little bit choppy as we go through the rest of the evening hours. Across a large part of the Gulf, you can see a low pressure here is stretched a front all the way across the southern parts of the Bering, across the Alaska Peninsula, wrapping into low pressure south of Unalaska, and it's allowing moisture to work its way through the central and southern parts of the Panhandle. South of that, a lot of warm, if not just mild and damp air on the north side of that. Cloudy and cool, but not terribly wet at this point. It does look like we'll continue to see passing waves of clouds across the region, maybe some snow showers generally north from the Talkeetnas into the central and eastern interior. Has been a little bit of snow around the Fairbanks area, mainly around the hills it looks like, but certainly some unsettled conditions trending eastward, whereas a lot of the drier and more stable air has been pushing its way across the northern parts of the Gulf and west and southwestern Alaska this afternoon. Here's a look at the weather map, and you can see that front that's working its way slowly across south central and southwest. This will gradually turn into more of an occluded front as we get through tonight and tomorrow as the warmer air meets up with the cold. Low pressure is still south and west of Nikolsky. And another wave of colder air working its way eastward into British Columbia. Some rain on the northern edge of that boundary. And across the central and eastern interior, the front pressing eastward has a little bit of snow and rain attached to it. The colder weather up north certainly all involved with snow across the Arctic coast and into parts of our Brooks Range passes. That low there at 987 millibars with high pressure parked right across Unalakleet and points west out into the Bering at 1,023 millibars and several waves of low pressure off to the west of that. By tonight, again, that warm and cold air kind of mashes up across the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain. Low pressure now down to 988 millibars as we head into the overnight hours, with high pressure sitting just east of Hyder at 1,029 millibars. That weak southerly flow should be enough to slop in some clouds for areas of light snow around the upper end of the Copper River Valley, areas of showers across the northern Gulf, and areas around Kashmak Bay all the way down toward Kodiak, starting to get into a little bit more of that solid rainfall. For tonight, a cold air mass working its way across the north slope will bring in a little bit more of a westerly wind. Watching for some light snow there, maybe another inch or two of snow, but there is some possibility that because of the open water and some of the warm air hanging on, wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of rain and snow mixing in there. Places like Utqiagvik could be looking at some freezing rain. Watching for areas of fog across some of the lowlands of the interior as high pressure settles in. And as we get into Thursday, that should clear up. You'll probably still get some sunshine, but you'll also be dealing with clouds working in from the south and southeast. Warmer air is working its way toward the outer coast of southeast. Areas of rainfall there around Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula. It doesn't look like it's really going to make it all the way into Anchorage, but it's going to be close. There is going to be some wetter weather around the hillside at least. And again, that should have the eyes of trick-or-treaters there, watching for some potential for some light rainfall in the region. Showers all the way down the Alaska Peninsula into the central and western chain there. And again, it will be unsettled as we go through the evening hours. Areas of light snowfall possible across south and west, including Lake Iliamna. It might be a little bit more on the fringe there, meaning rain and snow could fall in the region. Areas of light snow across the eastern Alaska Range, and again, mainly rain across northern parts of southeast. Drier weather for the interior all the way out toward Nome and parts of the Yukon Delta. High pressure just west of the Gulf of Vanity at 1,023 millibars, helping to push in colder air across the north. It's going to keep some light snow falling across the northern Arctic coast, but the good news is the wind should be letting up as we go ahead into the next 24 hours. So as we go into Friday, there's still a boundary located across the north, a 1,014 millibar low there just north of Kaktovik, but the winds should not be as much of a problem. There will still be some areas of choppy conditions just offshore, and areas of light snow will be in the region, but the really strong driving wind off the ocean should not be there anymore. It looks like high pressure tries to push its way into the upper end of the Yukon Valley. Because of that, the clouds may break up a little bit more all the way down toward Nome, St. Matthew, and St. Lawrence Island. Our disturbance that was a little bit stronger across the North Pacific is also relenting somewhat at 1,008 millibars, sitting just west and south of Lake Iliamna. We still have a trough of low pressure extending in across the eastern Alaska Range, and that will still be capable of producing some light snow here and there, but it doesn't look to be a widespread precipitation or wind maker across the region. There will be some pockets of light rain across the area as we move toward the beginning of November, and some regions of light rainfall across parts of southeast. More clouds than anything else across south central, southwest, and southeastern Alaska, it looks like, as we head into your Friday. Let's take a look at temperatures now. As we go into southeast, for tonight, lower 40s for the most part there. A few spots, a little bit drier, a little less cloud cover. You might drop into the upper 30s. Cordova into Valdez, 30s and 40s there. Mid-30s for the Cook Inlet regions, including Kenai, 35, 42 around Kodiak. Heading up the road toward Talkeetna, 33 degrees, 10 in Healy. Fairbanks looking at 15, Fort Yukon, 18 degrees. 20s and 30s for the northern Arctic coast. As we get into Kotzebue Sound, you're looking at 20s there, 23 in Nome. Ammonik, areas around Bethel, likely lower 20s there as you get out toward Nunivak Island and Macquarie, 24. 34 in St. Paul, and 40s for the Alaska Peninsula all the way out to the chain. Shemya, though, a little bit cooler, 38. High temperatures for your Thursday. Halloween looks like upper 20s and lower 30s around Kotzebue Sound, 20s and 30s there, 30 around Nome. Southwest, you're looking at 30s and 40s there. Look at the warmth here around Bristol Bay, especially down from King Salmon to Port Hayden and Pilot Point, probably looking at temps in the lower 50s, Sandpoint 52, 50 around Kodiak, lower 40s around Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, mild there, 46 around Cordova, and mid to upper 40s for many in southeast. Sitka about almost 50 degrees really, 22 around Fort Yukon and 27 in Fairbanks. As we get into Friday morning, temps are going to cool off even more around the upper Yukon Valley out toward Bettles, 1 below there, 5 below for Anaktuvik Pass, 5 above for Fort Yukon. Teens for North Way and Eagle. Just about 20 in Fairbanks, South Central, and certainly south of the Alaska Range. We're still talking about temps in the 30s and 40s and lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint, though, still holding on to some of that milder weather at 46. Southeast, we see temperatures holding from about 40 to 45. St. Paul and St. George, 36. Gamble and Savunga, very close to freezing, 22 in Nome. Kotzebue, you're looking at about 19 degrees. Ambler, 8. And Wainwright, about 28 degrees as we get into your Friday morning. Let's take a look a little bit further out into Friday afternoon, and you see single-digit temps for Arctic Village. Only 2 there, below freezing for the Beaufort Seacoast, including Utqiagvik and Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. Southeast, you're looking at temps in the 40s and 50s, lower 40s for South Central, 48 around Kodiak, lower 50s around the Bristol Bay region, 45 around Dillingham, and 43 for St. Paul, as well as Adak and Atka. As we take a look at temperatures again into the weekend, it looks like things will be cooling off a little bit more, especially in the north for your Saturday and your Sunday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to your aviation weather now, with low pressure moving across the North Pacific. Expect a wide swath of IFR to remain just south of the Pribilof, stretching all the way out to the central Aleutians and working its way up the Alaska Peninsula and into Bristol Bay, over Kodiak Island, up into the Barren Islands and parts of Kachemak Bay, as well as the Kenai Fjords region and Resurrection Bay, and all over southeastern Alaska. MVFR should spread up into the Copper River Valley, as well as the Susitna Valley, the Kenai Peninsula, and parts of southwestern Alaska. Most of the Yukon Valley will start out tomorrow morning under VFR conditions, though there may be some patchy areas of fog thanks to extensive high pressure out across the western Bering Sea. Across the Kobuk and Noatak valleys and the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, watch for marginal conditions. Some of that will overtake AKwx and Adigan Pass. And watch for IFR across the north slope, including areas around Utqiagvik, east toward Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, and west throughout Wainwright. As we go into the afternoon, that IFR region will shift eastward there. Expect widespread MVFR, though, for most of our coastal locations in the north and around the Seward Peninsula, including Kotzebue Sound. South of that, and once again for the Yukon Valley, things look to remain VFR. For the afternoon, a wide swath of IFR conditions should be expected across the north and eastern Gulf, slowly approaching parts of the outer coast of southeast, but most of southeast, especially the Inside Passage, will be dealing with marginal conditions throughout the day. Southwest, including the Pribilofs, will be looking at marginal conditions throughout your afternoon, and you'll see that area of IFR expanding as we go into Friday afternoon for parts of the Kuskokwim and Yukon deltas. Watch for some breaks in the overcast and certainly the improved visibility just outside of Bristol Bay, and south and west of Castle Cape all the way out toward Chignik, and south and west toward Sandpoint. We expect to see IFR conditions that will linger for the central Aleutians as well. Southeast looks for increasing areas of IFR again for Friday morning, some of that reaching into the Chilkoot and White Pass regions down to the capital city and all along the outer coast into parts of the Dixon Entrance, and also in the upper Tanana and the upper Yukon valleys. Marginal conditions will continue around the north slope, all the way from Kaktovik west toward Point Hope and Point Lay and into Kotzebue Sound. By the afternoon Friday, the low pressure system is working its way into the Gulf, and you can still see its wraparound moisture affecting areas in south central and southwest with IFR conditions. That will continue into the eastern chain and a large part of the Alaska Peninsula, as well as parts of the southeast. Marginal conditions cover up the Gulf and extend northward into the Yukon Delta all the way through the Pribilofs and also around St. Lawrence Island, Gamble and Savunga included, and many areas across the north slope still looking at least marginal conditions when many parts in the upper Yukon, the upper Kobuk, and the upper Koyukuk for that matter, all expected to see VFR by Friday afternoon, so some improvement possible. Here's your pass conditions in detail now for AKwx and Adigan Pass. We expect to see a trend toward VFR conditions as we go throughout the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass going the opposite way, over toward IFR by the afternoon. We expect to see Rainy Pass looking for marginal conditions by afternoon. MVFR all day long for Windy Pass and Isabel Pass. Mentasta Pass looking to be marginal most of the day. Tanita Pass also marginal. IFR expected to develop across the eastern side of Portage Pass and then probably close things off a little bit in the afternoon. Chilkoot and White Pass should see some minor improvements throughout your Thursday. Freezing levels show that warm air at the surface is lifting northward, but you can see the cold air aloft certainly making an impact coming in from the north, pushing the freezing levels down to about 2,000 to 4,000 feet across Bristol Bay and anywhere from 2,000 to almost 6,000 feet across southeast and 2,000 to 4,000 feet across the central Aleutians. Everything north of the Alaska Range, by and large, is sub-freezing by tomorrow morning. Areas across the north slope are looking at some icing potential in the isolated moderate range, generally above 1,000 feet for the north slope, and many areas from the Alaska Range southward you'll have to climb up about 5, 6, 7,000 feet to get into any isolated moderate threats there, but that does seem to cover up a large part of Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula, most of southeast, and really most of southwestern Alaska for that matter as we go through your day. The jet stream has a powerful area of low pressure sitting just south and west of Bristol Bay, southerly winds around 80 knots or so, and another push of stronger winds coming behind that around 120 knots. And the polar jet combining with the Pacific jet right over Alaska, wind speeds there anywhere from 85 to about 100 knots. Broader flow generally around the southwest coming in across the Gulf, southeast, and the interior anywhere from 15 to about 30, maybe even 40 knots. Wave of low pressure here across southwestern Alaska, drawing in a northeasterly flow across the Bering with high pressure west and south of the Gulf of Anadyr. Westerlies for the North Slope 20 to 25. You see that a little bit stronger at 3,000 feet. Again, that south and westerly flow a little bit displaced to the east for southeastern Alaska, 3,000 feet, wind speeds there 15 to 30. A stronger south and easterly flow wrapping into low pressure here across the western Alaska range, anywhere from 30 to 45 knots, and high pressure in the same old spot. We're watching for the possibility of some isolated severe across southwest and the Kenai Peninsula tomorrow.
What we're looking at is a legacy of the Ice Age. Permafrost and methane is a time machine. So what we're going to do is walk back in time. We're going to see old carbon, old bones, old environments, and none of those are in equilibrium with today's climate, so that's the problem. That world doesn't exist anymore, and it hasn't for 10,000 years. It was nicely and very delicately separated from this modern warmer climate by about this much moss. And when that moss goes away, whether for fire or for human disturbance or for warming, then all hell breaks loose.
Permafrost. It's maybe the part of the cryosphere that's most out of sight and mind. It's fascinating how it formed in the first place and how it got loaded with so much carbon. In a minute, we'll go back underground with Matthew Sturm from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. But first, let's meet Peter Griffith, NASA's project manager for the Above campaign, which supports more than 70 science projects studying forest and tundra vegetation, wildfires, animals like birds, caribou, and Dall sheep, methane emissions from expanding northern lakes, and the impacts of climate change on people in Alaska, Canada, and around the world. Many of those projects have some direct connection to permafrost.
Permafrost is the hidden cryosphere. It's the permanently frozen soil that surrounds the Arctic, all across Alaska, northern Canada, and then across Eurasia. The ground has been frozen during the ice ages.
During the ice ages, there was not enough snowfall in the drier regions of Alaska and Canada to form glaciers there, so the land was suitable for vegetation.
What happened is that over thousands and thousands of years, all of that plant material got compacted and frozen every winter and buried and pushed down, so that today there's 300 feet deep of frozen water and dead plants and some pieces of dead animals too. Sometimes you find woolly mammoths in the permafrost. But most of it, of the organic matter as we call it in the permafrost, is frozen plant material.
Some of that plant material is now thawing and decaying, releasing its ancient carbon into the atmosphere, sometimes in the form of methane gas bubbling out of expanding northern lakes.
We started this field campaign because the Arctic is the part of the planet that is warming first and fastest. And there are consequences to this for permafrost. So during the Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, we're studying permafrost with people on the ground, from aircraft flying over the region, and also from satellites in space.
Another way to understand the permafrost is to take a walk below ground with Matthew Sturm and into the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permafrost tunnel.
And they've dug this tunnel back into the side of a hill about 200 feet, and it goes sort of sloping down so that by the end of the tunnel you're about 100 feet underground, and you're surrounded by bones sticking out of the wall from the steppe bison and mastodons that are frozen in it. There's sticks that are 40,000 years old, that you can touch with your hand. There's grass that's still green, that's tens of thousands of years old because it got frozen, right away, and it's never lost the green color.
But as fascinating as it is to see these relics of an ancient era, or to see a tree split in half by thawing soil, or even to light a ball of methane on fire from under winter ice, at the end of the day, Peter and his colleagues want to know just how much organic matter is frozen in that permafrost, and how fast it might be released.
Currently, we think that there is something on the order of 2 to 3 times as much carbon locked up as frozen organic matter in permafrost as there is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So releasing all of that organic carbon from permafrost into the atmosphere would be a real game changer. That would be a tremendous transformation of the planet's atmosphere. Now, the good news is that it would take a very, very long time for that to happen. However, we are warming the planet at a rate now that calls into question how quickly is that changing and what the consequences in the near future and in the far future are going to be.
You're in the middle of a field somewhere in California at 4 in the morning. It's sort of surreal in a way because you've put so much time into it for so long, and actually seeing it over there is like, whoa, it's a big deal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with your marine weather update now, and once again, apologies for our a different sea ice map here. This is kind of the standby as we get our computers back up to snuff and back in gear here as we've made some transitions and some updates that the graphics don't like so much just yet. But this is exactly what you'll see on our website, weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. And the red areas indicate high concentration ice as this is tracking from east to west. And kind of working through the Beaufort Gyre, you can see some higher concentration areas across the eastern part of the image. And we're still looking at some ice that has been forming along the coast, but we do have a very strong storm that's working across the northern parts of the Arctic coast and probably chewing up a lot of the ice and also working warmer air and water north and east into that ice pack. Right now, the southern extent of the ice, generally north of Utqiagvik, is still about 350 nautical miles away from the coast. For southeast, south and easterly winds will be light on the inside, 10 to 15 knots. You're looking at about 2 to 3 foot seas tomorrow, anywhere from 6 to maybe 8 foot seas across the northern outer coast, anywhere from 15 to 20 knots, generally speaking, across the outer coast from the south and southeast. For Friday, a little bit more of an onshore push as the next wave of weather works ashore, 20 to 25 knots there. Look for about 10 to 11 foot seas south of Sitka and Port Alexander, 9 to 10 foot seas on the northern end. On the inside, winds come up quite a bit around Stevens Passage through the Dixon entrance and Clarence Strait, 20 to 25, 4 to 5 foot seas. There's southerlies in the Lynn Canal, 15 knots and 3 foot seas on Friday. Inside of Prince William Sound, 25 knots to about 30 outside anyway. Easterlies working their way across the northern Gulf, 6 to 7 foot seas there. Northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet, 25 to 35 knots. The highest seas, of course, around the Barrens. 12 foot seas on the eastern side, 35 knots, all coming in from the northern Gulf. They're about 30 knots with 11 foot seas outside of Resurrection Bay. On Thursday, a little bit more of a southerly flow coming in on Friday. Northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound with 3 foot seas, 15 knots there, 15 to 20 across Cook Inlet. 3 to 5 foot seas from north to south with that south and westerly flow across the northern Gulf for Friday. For Thursday, an easterly flow coming through Bristol Bay up to 35 knots there. You're looking at about 8 foot seas, 10 foot seas down the coast. For the northern Gulf, anywhere from 30 to 35, looking for 12 to 14 foot seas there from AKwx all the way down toward False Pass. Again, low pressure is working its way across here, so you're going to see a lot of changing conditions as we go through the next 24 hours. Higher seas, different wind conditions, and certainly different speeds as that low pressure system is organizing itself and moving into the West Gulf waters. Easterlies coming through Shelikof Strait, 35 knots, 11-foot seas there, 14-foot seas east of the island. As we get into Friday, look for a south and southwesterly flow, 15 to 20, 3 to 5-foot seas there, and 10 to 12-foot seas there from Kodiak all the way down towards Sand Point. Anywhere from about 20 to 25 knots coming in from the west and southwest on Thursday. Stronger north and easterly winds coming across the Pribilofs there on Thursday. Look for that east and northerly flow coming through the eastern and central chain. Stronger winds on the north side. Look for northerlies cutting through the gaps there from Adak to Atka, 30 knots and 10 to 13-foot seas on Thursday. Winds diminish in all areas on Friday. North and easterly flow for the most part for the central and eastern chain. Still holding onto that northeast flow out west, so not a whole lot of change there. 7 to 8-foot seas in the west. You're looking at 7 to 9-foot seas in the central and eastern chain, and about 7-foot seas there for the North Pacific waters as you go into your Friday afternoon. Northeasterly winds also blowing off the west coast of Alaska, 15 to 30 knots, 35 south of Nunivak Island and into the Kuskokwim Delta. Now you're looking about St. Paul, St. George, 35 knots and 13-foot seas there on Thursday, diminishing as we get into Friday with northerlies still holding around 20 to 30 knots across the northern Bering Sea and outside of Norton Sound. 20 knots and 4-foot seas blowing over St. Lawrence Island and Savunga. For Thursday, strong westerlies continue across the Beaufort Seacoast, 9 to 11-foot seas there. A little less wind from Cape Lisburne southward into Kotzebue Sound, 10 to 15 knots, generally 4 to 5-foot seas in the region. For Friday, the winds diminish a little bit more. Still looking at an onshore flow, though, northwesterlies, 3 to 5-foot seas expected, and north and westerlies cutting across the Beaufort. That diminishes down to 15 to 30. But still a little blustery there from Prudhoe Bay out toward Kaktovik, obviously. 6 to 8-foot seas expected on Friday. Recapping tonight's weather, winter weather advisories and high surf advisories continue around the northern Arctic coast. That should all improve as we go through tonight and tomorrow. High surf could continue to be about 4 to 6 feet above normal high tide levels, and you may see some mixed precipitation across the region around Utqiagvik and also across the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. That does look like that will all improve. Minor accumulations of snow may be possible there, but nothing too significant at this point. Low pressure south of the central and eastern chain at 988 millibars will work a front into Bristol Bay and across parts of southwestern Alaska as we go into Thursday. And light rainfall is expected across south central and northern parts of southeast as we go through Thursday. Unsettled weather for many across southern parts of Alaska through the week.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.